These secret documents reveal that the risks were known from the beginning. The chemical industry knew much more about its miracle products than it was telling. And one of the most toxic was vinyl chloride, the chemical Dan Ross was working with.
One of the indications that they knew they should have been telling the workforce as well as the public about this is that they mark all of these documents secret, confidential. They tell each other in these documents, keep this within the company. Do not tell anybody else about this problem. And so they know this is dynamite.
Gerald Markowitz and David Rossner are historians of public health in New York. They were retained by 2 law firms to study the Ross archive.
They certainly never expected historians to be able to look into the inner workings of their trade association and their vinyl chloride committee meetings and the planning for their attempts to cover up and to basically obscure their role in these workers' deaths.
The hidden history begins with a document from May 1959.
To Director, Department of Industrial Hygiene, the B.F. Goodrich Company. We have been investigating vinyl chloride a bit. We feel quite confident that 500 parts per million is going to produce rather appreciable injury when inhaled 7 hours a day, 5 days a week for an extended period.
It is early correspondence among industry medical officers who were studying the effects of working with vinyl chloride. At the time, workers were regularly exposed to at least 500 parts per million.
November 24th, 1959. Intercompany correspondence, Union Carbide. An off-the-record phone call from V.K. Rowe gives me incomplete data on their current repeated inhalation study. Vinyl chloride monomer is more toxic than has been believed.
B.F. Goodrich was one of the vinyl chloride producers in on the industry's private conversations.
I started there in June the 3rd, 1955.
55? Mm-hmm. When you began, did you think the work might be dangerous?
No. They told us it wasn't. The only thing we had to watch about the vinyl chloride was not to get enough of it to pass out.
Fresh out of the Army, Bernard Skaggs went to work at the B.F. Goodrich plant in Louisville, Kentucky. There, vinyl chloride gas was turned into a dough-like mixture that was then dried and processed into the raw material for PVC plastic. Bernie Skaggs' job was to climb into the giant vats that spun and mixed the vinyl chloride and chip off what was left behind. Workers called it kettle crud.
There was vinyl chloride everywhere. The overhead valves had charging valves over where the vinyl chloride was pumped into to the reactors. All of those leaked and dripped. Most of them dripped on the floor all the time. They said it had to be, I think they said it was 1,500 parts per million before you could smell it. Not only could you smell it, you could see it. It would get into a vapor, and through the sunlight, it waves in. You see it is all the time that way. My hands began to get sore, and they began to swell some. My fingers got so sore on the ends I couldn't button a shirt, couldn't dial a phone, and I had thick skin like it's burned all over the back of my hand, the back of my fingers, all the way up under my arm, almost to my armpit. And after enough time, I got like thick places on my face, right under my eyes.
Did you think it might be related to your job?
At the start, no.
B.F. Goodrich would discover the truth.
From the B.F. Goodrich Company to Union Carbide, Imperial Chemical Industries, and the Monsanto Company. Gentlemen, there is no question but that skin lesions, absorption of bone of the terminal joints of the hands, and circulatory changes can occur in workers associated with the polymerization of PVC.
In other words, they knew vinyl chloride could cause the bones in the hands of their workers to dissolve.
Of course, the confidentiality of this data is exceedingly important.
What does this memo tell you, this particular memo?
Well, it tells me that the industry never expected that they would be held accountable to the public about what was happening to the workforce. They never even expected their workers to learn of the problems that they were facing and the causes of it.
Bernie Skaggs' hands were eventually x-rayed.
I was really shocked.
What did you see?
Well, on the hands, my fingers were all, showed up, the bone shows up white in the x-ray.
In a normal x-ray?
Yeah, normal x-ray, yeah. And mine were okay till they got out to this first joint. Then from there out, most of it was black. Some of them had a little half moon around the end, and then just a little bit beyond the joint. I said, what is that? You really surprised me. He said that the bone is being destroyed.
That's the black showed that there was no bone there.
Right. The bone was disappearing, just gone.
Dissolving.
Yeah.
It was the slowness of action on the industry's part that was the most striking issue in reviewing these documents.
Dr. Richard Lemon was deputy director of the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health until he retired 5 years ago.
That's correct.
The Baggett law firm hired him to analyze the secret documents.
The basic tenet of public health is to prevent, once you've found something, immediately stop exposure.
So they should have told the workers right then.
They absolutely should have told the workers. Even if it was only a suspicion, they should have told the workers what they knew and what they could do to prevent their exposure to what they thought was causing the disease.
That is not what happened. B.F. Goodrich did not tell the workers, even though its own medical consultants were reporting the truth.
October 6, 1966. The clinical manifestations are such as to suggest the possibility of a disabling disease as a later development.
What the company's advisors feared was that the dissolving hand bones could be a warning of something even more serious.
May be a systemic disease as opposed to a purely localized disease, fingers. They, Goodrich, are worried about possible long-term effect on body tissue, especially if it proves to be systemic.
Systemic. But what's that saying? Interpret that for a layman.
Well, what that's saying is that this disease may be much beyond just the fingertips, that it could have effects on other organs in the body or other parts of the body.
If all the doctor is looking for is, concerns about tufts of the fingers, and has not been told in the medical literature that this might be a systemic disease, that this information is kept within the chemical industry, then that worker is going to be misdiagnosed, the worker's condition is going to get worse, and there's no telling what the effects are going to be for that worker.
He could die not knowing what had killed him.
Absolutely.
Goodrich executives did tell other companies what was happening. But they hoped all will use discretion
in making the problem public. They particularly want to avoid exposés like Silent Spring and Unsafe at Any Speed.
They understand the implications of what is before them, and they are faced with a situation that could explode at any minute. And they
politically,
culturally, economically, this could affect their whole industry if people feel that this plastic could represent a real hazard to the workforce. And if it could present a hazard to the workforce, people are going to wonder, consumers are going to wonder, what is the impact that it could have for me?